All right, we're rolling. So, Dan, welcome to the show. I appreciate you doing this.
My pleasure, man. It's great to see you again.
It's been a long time.
Yeah, it has, hasn't it? Probably too long. Yeah.
You're a
Awesome.
successful tech executive now, but I remember when we used to wash clubs at the golf course.
Exactly. And successful is a strong word, but yeah, I used to scrub clubs, and I remember getting really excited when people would tip $5, and
Yeah,
yeah, man, and they get the morning open shifts, and sure.
Now that's a cup of coffee for you these days.
Yeah, everyone, I guess.
Yeah. So you are the CEO of Koho Financial now, but maybe I'll let you explain what Koho is briefly, because you can do a better job than I can on that.
So look, Koho is what in our world is called a challenger bank. And maybe I'll just kind of give you a bit of context in terms of why I started it, because I think that matters. So when I first co-founded a wind energy company with a friend, and we ended up building that company, and got lucky, and for the first time came into a little bit of money after we sold that company. Mm-hmm. Through that process got a little more financially sophisticated, because I was like, what am I going to do with this at this point? And then through that kind of got financially sophisticated, or somewhat anyway, and then started looking at my mom's investment portfolio. And I grew up to a mom who had to work really, really hard to give us like a comfortable Canadian middle-class lifestyle, which is like a really wonderful thing. Yeah. And you look at her investment portfolio and you realize that like 40% of her retirement is going to get corroded by completely self-serving financial behavior. It's what's called a high MER mutual fund, but it's like the standard investment product that's still sold in Canada. Yeah. And that just seemed like fundamentally unsound and unfair. And then, so wanted to address that or try and be helpful, in what I did. And anyway, so fast forward to Koho, and what we realized was kind of like the primary financial relationship, where you spend, where your paycheck lands. That's ultimately kind of the gateway to the whole ecosystem of somebody's financial life. And that's what we wanted to do with Koho is address that. And so we're trying to do two things. How do we give everybody a great financial foundation, and how do we democratize access to the best financial products? So one other thing that maybe always kind of bugged me in Canada is, we have these 6 banks that control everything, and 95% of the accounts, 95% of the assets. And if you go to any one of them and you open up a savings account and you have less than $5,000, they'll pay you like 0.01 or 0.05% or something, and then they'll turn around and make 40 times that on their own on loans. That money. So I'm yet to hear a compelling argument why an oligopoly that's protected, which then prices out those in Canada with the least, is not a poor tax. And so that's kind of the DNA of what we're trying to address at Koho. And so today that means we have a no-fee account that kind of does everything a traditional account does. Makes it much easier to save, catch back on everything in real time, immediate kind of peer-to-peer transfers. We've just launched our early payroll, which means that you get paid. We automatically advance you $100 3 days before your paycheck, just because a lot of people that's when they tend to get into trouble on some extra bills or something like that, and get into payday lending, and that's a whole different thing. And so it's a bit long-winded, but that's kind of what we do. And we got a bunch of stuff coming down the pipe that will go well beyond the role of just spending, but getting you a great interest account and a much easier way to rebuild your credit and all these kinds of things.
So in layman's terms, when I log into my CIBC account, you are the low-fee alternative to that?
Exactly. Yeah, you could think of us as that. It's
everything,
all
checking, Visa.
Yeah, and an important thing which I get, is we don't hold your money, so we partner with a bank. They take the deposits, because you really kind of don't want a startup holding your money. You want it to sit at a regulated bank, and so we've partnered with a bank. The money still sits at a chartered, regulated financial institution, and kind of we do everything else.
And charge less money.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, cool. And as the CEO of a alternative bank, I'm guessing you don't use a Visa then, or maybe you do still?
So I don't use a credit card. My whole life
Okay.
is on Koho,
Right.
but it is a Koho Visa.
Oh,
It,
interesting.
so basically it runs on the Visa rails, but it's my paycheck is in there. I pay my mortgage out of it. Like it's my whole life.
Huh.
And so I don't need a credit account, and I don't need a checkings and a savings, and you know, just one account that does all of the things. Because when we like the notion of a checkings account and a savings account,
Yeah.
there's no reason a savings account can't pay interest, and there's no reason you can't, spend money from spend money from a savings account or pay interest on a checking account. It's just like an artificial construct, so banks can charge fees, right? And it just
I
creates
see.
complexity. And like what you actually need is just like, where's my money? How do I access it simply? Like, how do I access it in a way that I understand? And that's kind of directionally what we're trying to do.
And to be transparent with customers, how do you guys make money then? Is it on transactions
Yeah,
or?
it's a good question. Yeah, so there's something called so there's a couple main drivers of it, but there's something called interchange, and so it's on our website if you want to kind of dig in, or if your listeners want to dig in. But the short story is every time a merchant accepts a Visa card,
Yeah.
they pay that a fee to accept that Visa card.
Right.
Now, historically, your bank has charged, or your bank has collected that. In this case, we get that. And whereas a bank needs like bank fees and interchange to make money, because our business is just much leaner and much more efficient, we can get by and do well just off interchange alone. So we do have interchange, and then we also have a premium version of Koho, which comes with 2% cash back on a bunch of categories. It gives you price matching, so that at most major merchants, they have price matching guarantees, and you just take a photo of your receipt and it'll automatically tell you if you've got the best price and automatically send in for a refund. And it also comes with virtual care. So if you want to book a doctor's appointment online, all that stuff is free and included.
Cool.
Yeah, so that's $9 a month or $84 a year if users want to use that.
And it's going really well. Koho is growing, and I've read you guys have raised a bunch of money. And how's that? What's the financial picture like for you guys?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny, it's gone really well. We raised about $52 million last year to help the company grow. So the total we've raised is 62. And team's about 100 and a little over that at this point. But it's still super early, and we're really lucky to be in the position we are. But we've got, I still feel like it's the first inning, we've got, it's going to take a lot more capital to do the things we want to do. And, but so far it's gone well.
So money's not an issue at the moment. You got your own.
Money's always an issue when you're running a business, man. Yeah,
I suppose
you know
so.
this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yes,
Yeah.
I do.
Yeah. If it's not an issue, you're in rare company, or you're not paying attention to the right things, I think.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
So,
you were a successful entrepreneur before you started Koho. What was that business about? I read in the natural resources or something.
It was wind energy.
Right. Yeah.
So so I was a co-founder. My friend was the CEO, and we started that business actually in university, and it's a good story. We started in kind of like small private wind turbines, and so I when I was 22 years old, I was driving around southern Saskatchewan with like plugs in my ears trying to tell a 70-year-old they should buy a wind turbine from me. And they were just laughing me out of the room, as they should.
Yeah.
But we got a couple sales, and then through that got into kind of, I think, recognized an opportunity in industrial scale wind farm development, and so we had no money, and we were competing against organizations much bigger than us, and it was kind of like this lottery program, how the government went about allocating the contracts. And so what we did was we raised about $100,000 from friends and family, writing like $5,000 checks and $2,000 checks and that kind of stuff. And then we went to a wind turbine company and said, hey, we think we can win this, but we can't afford the engineering. So if you guys do the engineering for us, we promise we'll use your turbines if we win. And then we converted these town halls I used to have to sell turbines, and we converted them into basically, can we rent your land for 3 weeks? And if the application wins, then we have an agreement where we can rent it going forward. And then you also had to have a $25,000 check with each application. So we borrowed $400,000 for 3 weeks. So it looked like we had 25 because we had to have it with each
Oh my
application.
goodness. Yeah.
And so ended up, kind of hacking the process a little bit. Won 2 of the 3 contracts that they issued that year. And anyway, took that up to a point where we were able to sell it. And I should say, like, my friend is a CEO, so he did, I was kind of just following his lead. But yeah, got lucky. Worked hard, but also got lucky for sure. And yeah, and that was kind of the first business. And I was really lucky because it kind of cracked the veil of large organizations, which I think in some ways gave me maybe the hubris to go after the banks in Canada.
Yeah.
Because you realize that big does not at all equate to like effective or
Competence.
even pragmatic.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and so it was like a really good experience. And then the second business I started was we ran kind of a logistics company during, I don't know if you remember Groupon and like the heyday of
Yep.
those kind of businesses.
Yep.
And we had this logistics company which was supplying some of these sites with some of their inventory. And the first year we had a good year, and we to be honest, for the sake of program, we did $300,000 in revenue in our first year. And I don't know if I can swear, but I fucking hated it.
Okay.
And I hated it because it was just the incentive in that business is to like inflate the value of it, and then to make it look like you're giving a massive discount. And then it's also to produce as much low quality stuff as you can, because then you can like create the online perspective that you're giving this massive discount. Right. And so what ended up winning and driving all the volume was just stuff that was like really low quality. And we just like couldn't, it was lousy products. And we just couldn't shake the sense that like the stuff that we were selling was going to be in a landfill in 6 weeks.
Right.
And so it was like this interesting inversion in the sense that the business was working and it was going well, but it was just like wasn't compatible with the type of business that I wanted to build. You know what I mean? So it ended up being pretty slow.
Not very fulfilling. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I mean, I've had some other ones. I started a portering company because I wanted to get paid to go hiking back in BC and Invermere, where we're from.
I had that idea. I thought about doing that once too. Yeah.
It was awesome. I loved it.
Did you do that? Really?
Yeah. I think we were the first portering company in BC. Shout out to Brody Smith, who might be one of your listeners, because we did it together.
Yeah, I remember Brody.
Yeah. It was awesome. It was great. We'd go hug the bugaboos, and like you're getting paid to go hiking. It's probably to date my favorite job.
Yeah.
I made no money, but whatever.
Yeah. I mean, I thought maybe a guide business would be cool if you could somehow scale some sort of guide business.
Sure, that'd be awesome.
But anyways,
I think Brody did figure that out because that is what he's doing. So.
Oh, okay. There you go.
Yeah. So
you've had a few things along the way, and then Koho came along. You jumped into tech. Were you always tech?
No, I wasn't. I think one of the things that I learned in doing the renewable energy company is a couple things. It's so capital intensive to get those things stood up, and all that capital is front loaded, right? And the moniker that people use in tech is like bits versus atoms, but it's so much more expensive to scale physical products like atoms than it is to just bits.
Yeah, for sure.
And so, yeah, exactly. And so that was one part of it. Is just like the ability to reach scale and leverage was just so much cleaner. And I really kind of got the sense, and I think it's true, that we got lucky in terms of the timing and the process and all that kind of stuff. And it's not a meritocracy in the way that tech is, in the way that because if you're relying on government regulations to like there's this much you can build this year and all, you know what I mean, and like those things are political and they change, and we saw them change, and so it's just kind of you're on less steady ground for sure. And so I left it because I wanted to leave regulated industries, and then found myself in banking because I'm a slow learner. But the idea was that it would be like a pure play B2C scale is where I was interested in tech, and then ended up finding like this was the problem that resonated. So.
The article I read was you got into tech and had to teach yourself how to code and kind of learn as you went, or are you still learning that?
No, I can't code at all. I don't know. There's
Okay.
sometimes these articles get away from you, but no, I can't code. I'm not technical. We have a CTO at the company, and
Huh.
about half the team is engineers and stuff like that. So
Interesting. And so what is your day-to-day like then? You're not behind a computer all the time, I would imagine. You're a lot of meetings and.
yeah, well, I mean, in a COVID environment, meetings are computers. Yeah, so it's interesting. It's changed, and it's even changed kind of more recently in the last couple of weeks. But most, and I think that because I think my a bit of my orientation and DNA is to like be inward facing and work, and I probably a bit of like a workhorse versus like a really kind of those people who are really sort of gregarious CEOs who can like speak on at length and
Right.
have a ton of that kind of magnetism. But so my but you kind of grow into it because that is most of my day-to-day now is honestly repetition around the mission and trying to figure out how to get great people through the door to join the company. We're hiring, and I would say probably 50 to 60% of my time is that. And especially in a remote environment, I think it's a truism, but it's so hard to get right. Is making sure that everybody's rowing the same way and making sure that everybody understands the vision and the DNA and all those kinds of things, which is kind of a general statement. But the way that I think about it is, what would it take to be in the top 5 percentile of companies when it comes to understanding what your organizational DNA is, or to be clear on where you're going or focused on where you're going, just to kind of litmus test whether I think we're doing enough. So a lot of my day is that. It's a lot of repetition, but it's important and it's rewarding. So.
You're a tech company based in Canada, out of Toronto. Did you feel like you had to move out to Toronto to attract good talent, or is there a pressure to move south, to say San Francisco?
No, there's no pressure to move south because I think we're like the product's only available in Canada. We're super focused on Canada. We have no plans to leave. We think this market is definitely big enough, and I think we have the leadership position, and so for us, it's like we really think that if we can stay focused, we can build the next generation of banks that's going to be here in 40 or 50 years, and really kind of make a run at this. So. So we're not going south of the border. We are hiring some people from there, but head office is in Toronto. Yeah, from a Vancouver. So we started the company in Vancouver when we were 13 people. When we raised what's called our Series A, but that's usually the third round of funding in a company. We moved the company to Toronto, and I think it was like an ask from our investors. It was the right ask. Because I think there is more urgency in Toronto than there is in Vancouver, and that's where we were obviously, and so I think it was the right thing. I think we needed to get a little bit more competitive as an organization, and so what we did was we rented 2 Airbnbs side by side, one for the guys and one for the girls. We called it Camp Koho. We all lived there for a month while everybody found their footing.
Nice.
And we still kind of at every year's offsite, we still have a bit of a tribute to Camp Koho, and we call it Camp Koho and stuff like that. So it's part of the organizational lore now, I guess.
Did you want to move to Toronto, or did you have to kind of drag your feet out there? Or?
No, God, no. No,
I was gonna say, you're from the mountains.
Oh, dude, I miss BC every day.
Yeah.
You know what? So I didn't personally, but I absolutely did professionally. When you're all in, you're all in, and it was clear that Toronto, if you're going to build a financial company in Toronto, it's the availability of especially financial talent out here is obviously much better. It's where every bank is educated or located. So it was the right thing to do. But now that it's COVID and we're working remote, I lived in BC for a month in July. I went back to yeah. So we'll see what happens.
You just don't tell anyone. You can just go right back and stay there in BC.
Totally. Yeah.
No one will know any different, but
just bring my background with me.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
When you were raising your seed money, what was that process like? Did you raise it mostly in Vancouver? Did you do it in Toronto, the US?
it was, so we didn't take US capital until our last round of funding. So it's all been Canadian for the first 3 rounds. What was it like? It was hard. I think it's gotten easier with everyone. Because I think the way that we talk about this is like, sorry. The way that we talk about this is that the price of opportunity is being misunderstood, and like if everybody gets what you're doing, then it probably means you're too late, or it's not as ambitious. And that's just our lens. Like there's obviously a bunch of different wonderful ways to build businesses, but and so, but that being said, when you're like one person in Vancouver going around to angel investors being like, I'm going to build the next bank in Canada, they think you're an idiot, which to be fair, that's an okay reaction. And so we ended up raising kind of $1 million in that first round, and that was everything from, I was fortunate to have some investors who believed in me, who had credibility, and so they put in the first 150K predicated on other people coming in, and so it ended up kind of being this a bit sort of jockeying thing where the investors would say, I'll put capital in if other investors put capital in, and other investors would put capital in if we got a deal with Visa and also like the bank, which is called People's Trust. And so it ended up kind of like moving these things sort of inch by inch until everybody got to the same place where it's like, if we get People's Trust, or if we get a bank partner, and if we get Visa, then you guys will put in the capital. And we eventually kind of were able to push all three. But it took a lot of took a lot of work, for sure, because it was we raised a round of funding before we had a team. So normally you do this with like co-founders, and you'd have what's called a CTO or a technical co-founder and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, right.
That wasn't the Koho story. So a bit of we found those people after we raised money, or just kind of during the process. So it was definitely a little bit different, but we got there.
And do those guys sink their teeth in pretty quick? Are they expecting profits in year 3 or 4, or what's that been like?
No, I don't think they expect like what we're doing is capital intensive. And I warned them, I think, pretty early that I wasn't interested in just kind of flipping this company. And if I'm going to do this, because it took us 2 years to launch the product, right? And one of the things that made it hard was just, frankly, in Canada, this hadn't really been done before. And there's not really a playbook for it. And so there was a lot of skepticism from everybody that you could even do this. And now that, thankfully, that skepticism has passed, and there's like more companies coming behind us who are building great things. And it was, so that part of it was like getting those people on board was tricky for sure in that regard, just because there wasn't really a playbook.
Because if you're going to write a check for $1 million or whatever, I mean, you guys have, I think you said 50 now. Maybe you want your money back eventually.
Yeah, ideally. But this is the thing, if you're dealing with pros, and there's a lot of people in that early stage game that are not pros, or maybe not pros, but they're sort of traditional investors,
right,
masquerading as angel investors. And the idea with Koho, or most companies like ours that are sort of what's called venture backed, but the idea is that most of these people will approach this with, if they know what they're doing, is that you need a portfolio, because as you know, 70% of businesses fail, 70% of startups, it's higher in startups. And so the idea for these guys is they have a portfolio where half your companies are going to go to zero, 20% will like return 2 or 3x on your capital, and you'll have 1 or 2 that are going to be a 10 or a 50 or 30x or something like that. So if you have the right people, they understand that, and they kind of like treat the capital as though it's lost, frankly. It's like, if I ever see it again, it's great. It's the ones who are not aware of that end up being kind of a little bit too close, I would say.
Yeah, so you get the right sort of investor. If you present to the right people, it makes it a lot easier, I would imagine, for yourself.
Yeah, for sure. And they're, investors, like anything, when they're emotional creatures, and especially early days, when you don't, like, if somebody was to look at my business now, there's 1,000 data points they could look at to understand what's going on. But like back in those days, it's me saying I want to do this. So you have like 2 data points, you know what I mean? Like, what's the vertical? Do I like this guy? Do I think he can do it? and so it's just a way more subjective decision. But then when you get a few people who are credible, who have done things, who I tick those boxes for,
Yeah.
that's what the other investors care about, is like, just that other people are doing it. They're not like overthinking it generally.
Did you go down to, I think you said it was all Canadian money, or did you go down to Sandhill Road and all that, Greylock?
Yeah, we did. I think the industry has matured. So a couple things have changed a lot. The fintech industry is really born out, and like there's a lot of people who are successful with this model. Internationally, Chime is massive in the United States, and then 26 and Monzo in Europe, and so that has gotten much cleaner. But 5 years ago, when we were first raising money, nobody had really done it in a way that got investors excited. And then the other thing, which I think investors has also changed, is the US investors were just not interested in the Canada only business, because I don't think they thought you could build, and to their credit, they need to have multi-billion-dollar outcomes, based on that portfolio math that we're talking about, for it to be interesting for them.
Sure.
And so they're just like, they weren't aware, and I think that they very much are now, and we're having those conversations as a result, but that you could do this in Canada and create an outcome that's really compelling.
I read a lot of Tim Ferriss, and he was a big angel investor at one point. I don't know if you guys have crossed paths or.
No, I don't know Tim.
But that's kind of my education on angel investing is
cool.
The portfolio 1 in 10 sort of thing, and so I could see how you need the right guys, or else you may end up disappointing people or just getting pressured.
I mean, look. So when you get into the later stage and people are writing $10 and $20 million checks and stuff like that, like the irony is that it gets easier because they're pros and they understand what this is and what it isn't, right? But when you're like, and
that's so true.
And they risk like they see it as risk capital. But when you're dealing with kind of like people who are early stage and maybe aren't comfortable and or shouldn't be making angel investments because it's frankly too much of their net worth, you know what I mean? That it matters to them a lot financially, and so it creates financial stress. And so like I think my cousin put in 30 grand, and I was like, I'm only taking this money if you treat it like it's gone. Like this is statistically going to zero, or we super clear on that. And she's wonderful and awesome, but that it's kind of like it does take that mindset,
Right. What would success be for Koho? Selling the company eventually, or just a nice profit margin, or?
Look, I mean, I think I've thought about this in my own, just my own kind of personal journey. I thought that I would just be a guy that started companies every kind of 5 or 6 years and would build them and sell them. And what I've found is I'm not actually as engaged in that. What I think is a really rare thing that really gets me excited is what would it take to build a generational company?
Yeah, like, just a profitable company.
Yeah, but also a company that's going to be here in 50 or 60 years. Like, I mean, our banks are over 100 years old, which is so bananas to me. Like TD, which is a mid-sized bank in Canada, employs 80,000 people, and it's over 100 years. Like, that is such a insane scope that if you can kind of be a lever in that and also be a positive lever. So the real kind of thing that we're trying to do ultimately with Koho is, I think that the vast majority of financial products in Canada should be much better. And I think that the vast majority, and like, we're not there yet. We do some things well, but we definitely have a lot of room to get better. But if we do our job well, we will raise Canadian expectations. And in doing so, Canadians will become dissatisfied with the existing financial equation, and the banks will change. And if the banks change, then that's actually the lever where we go from like impacting only Koho users to impacting all of Canada, with just like, nobody is going to use your 0.05% savings account anymore, or nobody's going to pay $200 a year in bank fees anymore. It just doesn't make sense. And so when we talk about the outcomes, like IPO, exit, acquisition, all that stuff, I'm somewhat agnostic to. I think the idea of building a business that's going to be generational is an exciting thing. And I think, shifting the Canadian landscape for what is a good financial product is an exciting thing.
You always read about those companies that chose to remain small. There's certain examples out there of companies that maybe could have grown that didn't, but maybe that would be, do you think growing would be good for Koho, or do you think staying small and nimble is the better route?
So I think it's growing, but I think if you look at, I think it's a false dichotomy in the sense that most companies get big and they get slow.
Yeah,
I agree
exactly.
with you, but there are companies that get big and don't. Like if you look at Shopify, I think is faster now than they've ever been. And it's amazing. And their market cap's $160 billion.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And like that dichotomy of outcomes between like, how does Shopify move that fast? And CIBC's been frozen for 50 years. You know what I mean? Like, because they have access to the same people, they have access to the same talent and the same resources and the same money, and it's all the same.
Yeah.
But something about the way that they've organized their company and their culture and their mission and their DNA has allowed them to scale velocity. And something about the like I think, and I've never really worked at a large company, so I might be wrong here, but I think the vast majority of companies seem like terrible places to work. And I think they seem like they feel so disconnected from a mission, and it feels like a mundane way to operate.
Mm-hmm.
But all companies have access. There's so many companies with smart people that still end up kind of feeling like a big company and moving at the speed of a big company, which would suggest that it's actually just like a really hard problem. Not that there's not really smart people trying to figure it out.
Absolutely.
So I think about that a lot.
I started my career at ConocoPhillips, which is one of the major oil companies, and I think that would be the epitome of a large bureaucratic company.
Right. It's such an unnatural way to operate, isn't it?
It's like, I see the job security. Well, there used to be job security in big companies like that. Ironically, there is none anymore. But I didn't hate my time there, but at the same time, you certainly learn what you don't want to be like.
Yeah. Even that notion of job security, I feel like is not, and look, you have to have some level, like it's much easier for me to start a company than it is for somebody who's buried in $300,000 of student debt. And there's a level of like, I'm fortunate in that I was even able to do this. But when people talk about like job security, the only, if you work at a startup, like the critique of them is that they don't have job security, but you're really only out the time between in the worst outcome that your startup goes under and finding a new job. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So like, yeah, it's a hassle and it sucks when that stuff happens, and depending on how financially exposed you are, but you also get like everybody at Koho owns a part of Koho. And if we do our job well and we're successful and we execute well, like there's going to be a really good financial outcome for a lot of people at Koho. So I actually think like tech is a way more, or like, small businesses, that there's actually way more job security. And as you said, you can do everything right at ConocoPhillips and you can still get laid off at the end of the day because the energy industry is in a lot of trouble.
You've seen record layoffs in the oil industry and the energy industry, which used to be one of the most safe careers you could rely on.
Sure. Sure. Jim Carrey has this awesome speech which floats around YouTube, and he talks about how his dad was like funnier than he was. But he took like the safe route and wanted to be an accountant because he thought that's what his family wanted or would want. And then one day he got laid off and they're like homeless. He's like, and the way he puts it is like, you can, what does he say? You can do everything right and still fail. So you might as well follow your heart. And when he's saying right, he's talking about conservative and the white picket fence narrative. So
you might as well fail at doing something you want to do rather than
the best hedge is not job security. The best hedge is like just time well spent. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But if your time's well spent, it's kind of hard to have regrets.
Well, I read an interesting article. It was the guy, Scott Adams. He created the Dilbert comic strip. But he's a really smart guy. Anyways, the article was, if you pursue projects and create systems in your life that are you're learning the right things and you're learning the right lessons. Even if you do fail, you're still going to come out ahead.
Yeah,
So you might
totally.
as well, in the same sense as maybe working for a riskier startup, you'll probably learn skills and things like that you can't lose.
Yeah, and and again, I'm biased, so everybody should have their own perspective. But like the other thing about startups or or any of these kind of mission-driven organizations or whatever it happens, but what you really want to be around is just like a gravity of the most intellectually interesting people that you can. You know what I mean? And then if you build those relationships, like that's the multiplier that probably is the best predictor of where you're going to end up in life, is like the quality of the people around you and the quality of those relationships, because they'll go off and do interesting things. And if you killed it at your startup, even if it doesn't work, they'll call you and be like, hey, I need you, and that's kind of if you play a long game around relationships, I think. By the way, Scott Adams is one of those guys who he's a Trump supporter, which whatever, but he thinks that Trump is actually like one of the guys who thinks he has a master plan. So when he's not that he's like some erratic, crazy person, that he's like really deliberate and in what he does. Yeah.
I mean, he'll break down. I read it in Tools of Titans again, Tim Ferriss, but he breaks down. I'm not getting political or anything, but how Trump won was there was a lot of, I don't know if you want to call it reason, but a lot of it wasn't supposedly just an accident. But anyways, it's a different
he thinks
topic.
He's like systematic and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's so I don't know. I just found that article about creating systems that you win no matter what, right? That's the takeaway.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Where do you meet the talent you guys hire, or where do you find all these smart people? Is it kind of word of mouth, or how does that process work?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say we probably get about 40 or 50% of our hires from referrals. We've invested a lot in our culture, and I think tried to do things right from our perspective. So we've had a coach at Koho. So 1 second, just gonna close this. We've had a coach at Koho from the earliest days. When we had around 40 people, that coach came in-house full time. So I think that's a little bit rare for a company that's 40 people to have a full-time in-house coach. I think we're super transparent with people at the company. They see when I have a board meeting, the company sees the exact same materials 2 days later, and we walk through those. And so there's a lot of kind of candor. And I think when people, and we're not perfect at it for sure, and we're trying to get better, but I think we are quite good at it. And so when people work there and they feel connected to the mission and they feel like they have accountability and responsibility, I think that they become your champions to get more people through the door. But as that being said, it only goes so far, and we're trying to kind of more or less double our headcount every year. So hopefully by the end of next year, we're somewhere around 220 people or something. And that's hard. It takes a lot to ingest. That's like 4 people a week that you're trying to ingest, or I guess 2 people because we're already being 100. But that takes a lot of systems in place in terms of building an employer brand and the recruiting funnel. Because if you think about, like right now, it sounds hopefully, but doesn't sound obnoxious, but because it's just a data point. But there's like 3,000 people who are applying to Koho right now in our funnel that we have to like figure out how to process.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like that's, how do you do that?
You invest in it like a department, like anything else, right? So you like Scott at like you get really systematic about it. So we have 2 full-time recruiters at Koho, and all they do is like source and put people through the funnel. And your the executive team's job, as they get more and more senior, is much more one of talent and talent development and recruitment. And the more people you have in an organization, kind of the further away you are from direct work. And one of the things that the executives that scale recognize is that it's no longer about the work that you can do; it's about the work that you can get your team to do.
Right.
And the best precursor of that is like, can you attract just world-class people who are excited to work with you? So.
How do you do that? What do you tell them? Do you have a simple marketing message that?
No, you look, I mean, we look, I mean, the story matters. That's one of the things that I've learned, coming back to the point of repetition, is like I tell the story a lot. I thought it would be more boring than it is, but it's actually not, because I think
Yeah.
you end up connecting with people and it ends up kind of creating a more open, vulnerable conversation. And I think, the way that I talk about it is like, false positives or like hiring the wrong person is really expensive. It's really expensive for the candidate. It's really expensive for the company. So we really kind of go out of our way not to sell people on what the organization is, like, because it's just super expensive if we get the wrong person through the door. So we try and be really open about what's working and really open about what isn't. And I think people respond to that, and they seem to value it. And so, but that being said, talent's super competitive. Like, we're by no means nailing it, right? And the people that we're trying to get talent from are Amazon and Netflix and whoever, right? So it's really, really hard, as it should be. So.
Do you find yourself competing with the Shopifys of the world or companies like that?
I mean, I don't know that it's Shopify is so hard to compete with right now, because they've built such an incredible company. I have so much respect for those guys, and I'm such a Toby. I haven't met him, but Toby is their CEO, and I'm such a fan of him and the way that they've approached the organization. We have a few people from Shopify for sure. Given the fact that their stock is like 10x this year or something like that, a lot of those people are like, it's really hard to pull them out of there justifiably, because they're just doing so well financially at a company that's growing. And like, they have an incredible, I love what they say, they go arm the rebels is their mission, because they're just taking on Amazon. And so they have such a great rallying cry too, you know what I mean? So, but we're getting bigger and it's getting more compelling. And I think the story is becoming cleaner, and we've got some good people from that organization. So,
do you ever find yourself stressed out trying to run a tech startup? It seems like things are going pretty well, but how do you deal with stress and running a small company?
So we had a daughter 3.5 months ago.
This is awesome. Congrats.
Thanks, man. And that was hard. I don't think enough people say this, the first 2 months of being a parent sucks. It's awful. And and so trying to do that while running a company is hard. It's easy to get stressed out, for sure. I think it's a skill, actually, stress management, and should be treating accordingly. So I have a couple people that I have weekly calls with. I do therapy, which I'm a huge advocate for. So I kind of have some like resources that I put against it. The best thing with stress is always a function of like zooming out, because like if I look at the last 2 months of any time at Koho, I'm always like, there's a bunch of stuff working and there's a bunch of stuff that's stressing me out. But if I look at like Koho over a 1 year time horizon, I'm like, that's actually really good, and like it will, hopefully if we do our job, it will keep continuing, and if it doesn't, it doesn't. But if staying zoomed out is such an important part of understanding the trend line and not being so volatile to the day to day.
Absolutely. Failures? Have you guys had any failures you may have had to learn a lot from, or silver linings so far?
Yeah. Lots, man. I mean, it's hard to know what's a failure, because look, we're now 100 people. At the beginning of the year, I think we're 50 or 45 or something like that.
That's hard.
But the point is, like, TD has 80,000 employees, and that's like the number 3 bank in Canada. So all that is to say, we are massively under-resourced and massively, there's a real David Goliath component to this. And so mistakes are like the price of admission. Like you're just going to make mistakes, and you're going to, where we have gotten, I think, clearer is around the quality of mistakes. And so, we've had product launches which we got wrong, things we priced wrong. We've built things for 6 months that we ended up scrapping, and all those things happen. you want to kind of minimize them, for sure, obviously, but we try and think about the nature and the quality of the mistake, and it's like, was it, so there's a few questions to ask, right? Like, is this something we've done before?
Mm-hmm.
What piece of information do we know now, and was it available at the beginning? And then, if it's not something we've done before, and if it's information that we couldn't know that led to a mistake, then like, that's a really good mistake to make, and that's life.
Yeah.
If it's something that we've done 40 times and it's just a failure of execution or a failure of standards or a failure of brand promise, like, then it's a much more kind of serious conversation, as it should be, because I think we're trying to do something that requires a really high standard. So.
Who do you look towards as far as inspiration in business? Is there anyone that stands out, or are you kind of your own North Star?
So like I said, I think what Toby and the Shopify team have done is so good for Canada, and also just like, they're as good as anybody on the planet in terms of the talent that they built, and I admire so much about what those guys have done. Beyond that, I'm fortunate. I call them like my board of directors, but it's, I have a board of directors for the company, and then I have my own, and so it's guys like Chris O'Neill, who used to run Google Canada, is a real good friend and mentor to mine.
That's cool.
Our investors, Chris Olson from Drive is like amazing, and Rory is another who ran Twitter Canada. Sounds like I'm name dropping, but it's just stuff about.
Those are good guys to know, yeah.
but they're awesome,
for sure.
And like they're exactly who you would want people to be in that position. Like, they're not Machiavellian assholes. They're like deeply caring, deeply kind, deeply compassionate, super intelligent. Just guys who you have a lot of respect for. Joshua Bixby is another one. They're awesome. So,
would the mission of the company be providing a better financial platform for everyone? Is that kind of the long-term goal, or is there a cause that you maybe look towards, or anything like that?
Sorry, what do you? So yes, the company is like, how do we give everybody a great financial foundation, and then sort of provide access to great financial products? But what do you mean? Is there a cause?
Would there be like, for instance, Rose, our goal is to give back to the environment. What would you say is Koho's sort of mission, higher level?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I'm such a believer in agency and autonomy, and I think that
maybe you don't even have those thoughts. Those are pretty high level thoughts.
No, I do. But I think that my favorite thing about Koho is that the mission is a prerequisite for success, and like driving. So if we go out and we launch a credit card that's like kind of better than the banks, then we'll just fail. You know what I mean? So the only way that we win is if we are much better than the banks. And I think, the way that we think about this is like, what does a really healthy financial life look like? Mm-hmm. And I think, if you do that, and if we do our job well, then people have much more financial autonomy. And that means that they can own a second home, or visit their grandchildren more, or take more trips, whatever those things are. Like, I frankly don't care. I want them, like, if we do our job well, they should be able to live a more fulfilled life on whatever terms they want to,
You ever thought about I don't know, maybe Koho does this, investment management, low fees? Is there a product along that line? Because, I mean, I've read a lot about how investment managers really screw the clients over, and you probably get most likely better off just buying the S&P 500 most of the time. Do you guys ever think about that?
Yeah, we do. So we built we built our technology in a way, and if you think about a traditional bank, if you, Trevor, have $500 at your bank and you make a purchase for $30, what happens is there's a signal that's sent to your bank and say, does Trevor have $30 so that we can approve this transaction? And what we've built is our own internal ledger, so that we've decoupled where the funds sit from how we kind of make those transaction decisions. And what that means is that you can attach a card to anything. So we'll launch our savings account in, like I said, a month, and that'll probably be it'll be a great savings rate, and you'll just spend directly from that account. Going forward, we'll put investment accounts on there so that you can effectively spend directly from your investment account. You don't, whatever level of risk you're comfortable with, spend directly from a crypto account if that's your jam. But like we're fairly agnostic as to what, but I think we've unlocked a lot of utility by taking this approach. So
I just find, or it would seem like the investment management business is just right for somebody to come along and
yeah,
you know what
it
I mean?
is. And I mean, Wealthsimple is doing that and
Right.
doing really well. And they're close company with us. We're good friends with those guys.
Huh.
And so, yeah, so the idea would be that you would be in what's called an ETF or
Yeah, exactly.
yeah, like a low MER. So MER is what's called the management expense ratio, and most mutual funds charge between 2 to 2.5%, and a ETF will charge about anywhere from 0.1 to 0.6 generally.
Yeah.
So it's like much cheaper, and what happens is the difference in those prices is that generally about a 2% difference over 30 years means that you're retiring with 30 or 40% less money,
Yeah.
if not more. And so absolutely we're bringing those to market, and then we're also just doing away with, like, I don't need 8 financial products. I need, like, if I'm most comfortable in my ETF portfolio or my high interest savings account or whatever that thing is, and then I can just access those funds real time. My paycheck will go right into my investment account, go right into an ETF order. That's kind of the end state.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't really, you learn about that as you get older, I suppose, but
Yeah.
it would just seem like that's a no-brainer for something. And I guess it's already being done, and maybe you guys will attack that problem even more.
Yeah, I think we will. It is, we think, like I said, we think that the core part that you have to solve first is the direct deposit and where does your bank account, and like getting that stuff right, because there's a lot of problems in that part of the relationship. And then once you've done that and earned the trust, then you can bring those other financial products to bear, and people understand what the brand promise is, and they know they know with Koho that we're not going to charge them egregious fees, and that we're not, you know what I mean? So they don't really have to do the heavy lifting, because they know how we operate. The way that we talk about it internally is, can we get people to like, it's two things. Is it positive sum, meaning the user also benefits because it's better than the product that they would historically use, and can they adopt it in under 30 seconds? And if they can, then that would be how we think about the other products we bring on.
Do you ever get some stiff letters, or is there competition with the other banks that now that you're challenging them? Is it kind of like the Godfather in that sense, or how's that?
You know what? I don't, so it's funny. We do from, so I think
maybe you can't name names, but
no, yeah, I'm thinking about the delicate way to do this. So the short answer is yes, but
really?
It's also not fair to say that banks are one person or one thing. Like, I'm not picking on TD here, because they're all frankly kind of the same, but there's 80,000 people at TD. And some people of those 80,000 are going to be like, Dan, I love what you guys are doing at Koho, and like, how can I help? And some of them are going to be like, twist their mustache and be like, I like the old way of doing things, and call up their friends in whatever department to like make it a little more difficult.
Yeah.
The good news is there's only so much we can do, or they can do, and we're no longer a company. Like, we've reached a certain stage and amount of capital that, like, we're part of a group called the Paytex Association, and so like we have a voice in Ottawa now too, and we're a founding member of that, and
that's cool.
We're no longer with Shopify and some other organizations that are on there.
So they can't take out your knees then, basically.
yeah, and look, nor would I think they want to. I think, so my experience with them though is a lot of what is self-serving for the banks masquerades as interest around safety and security and all that kind of stuff, which is an easy kind of straw man to point to, but just completely not accurate, and doesn't map to reality. So and we've definitely fought some of those battles, and I'm sure we'll have to fight a lot more before it's all said and done.
Well, that's awesome. I won't take too much more of your time here, but it's been a cool discussion.
Yeah, no, these were great questions, man. Thank you for having me.
I appreciate you going through the business and everything. I guess some of the last things I usually touch on is best advice you've had in business so far, running Koho or in life in general.
I think it's probably what we talked about, in that, like, the hedge, if you're thinking about doing something, is always how will you feel about your time spent. You know what I mean? Like the outcome will be the outcome, and there's 1,000 things that are outside of your control. But I think that I think it's really tough to regret things that you just feel are important, useful things to put your energy towards, you know? So I'm fortunate to have people that have reminded me of that along the way.
Kind of like developing your talent stack. I think it was Tobias Lutke, who said, you know, the quote was, he played video games and went snowboarding. He didn't work 100-hour work weeks, and he didn't have an MBA, but he just followed his interests.
Right. And those guys, he's so thoughtful and nuanced and stuff like that. What's the best advice you've ever got? You probably have gotten more than I have doing this podcast.
Along those lines, I would say is,
you
know, regret minimization, or whatever fancy term you want to use. And,
sure.
You know, anything along, you know, just kind of following what you're interested, passionate about, you know, because you can get laid off pretty quick following the safe route.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. For sure, man.
Worst advice? What's the worst advice you've ever gotten?
You can't be too careful. Man, does it drive me crazy when people say that.
Okay.
Like it's such a lazy catch-all. You can definitely be too careful. And I think my experience overridingly is that people under-index on what they can accomplish, and things like you can't be too careful are just such safe places to live, and such, like, and that's where regret lives, you know what I mean? So I can't stand it when people say that, and I usually call them out on it, because it's one of those ones that gets under my skin immediately.
Well, that's awesome. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
I know you got a newborn to get back to, so we'll wrap things up here, but
thanks so much, man. This was a lot of fun. I appreciate it. It's good to see you again, and it's great to see Rose Bros. And I want to keep tabs on how you guys are doing too. So
appreciate it. Well, we'll wrap things up. Thank you. All right, that's it.
Thanks, man. That was a lot of fun.
Hopefully that was